All I'm saying is you better not Garfunkel me.
I love that man's name.
That's a good name.
I know his first name is technically Arthur, or I guess it is.
Yeah.
But I kind of wish it wasn't, because just Art Garfunkel is a cool name.
It is.
Yeah. It also just popped into my head. Garfunkel kind of sounds like Grunkle from Gravity Falls.
It really does, yeah. That's our new thing that we got to work in. We got to talk about Gravity Falls every week, and we got to talk about Armenia every week.
Yeah. And I'll mention Jennifer at some point.
Yes.
There we go. Already did.
And we got to mention that Paul Simon has 2 first names.
Yeah.
Every week.
2 very normal first names.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of a bummer. Wish it was special.
Yeah, it would be interesting. You know, I don't really think about it because like Paul Simon just like is him, you know?
Yeah.
But if you think about his name, it's kind of like, oh.
Well, yeah. I mean, same thing like Bob Dylan.
That's true. Yeah, that's not even his name.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Yeah. But whoever's the co-host this week, I think.
I don't even remember who's opening the episode.
Unfortunately, I think they're getting Garfunkeled. But maybe we just have to say it together.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Like right now.
Right now.
Welcome back. Oh my God.
Fucked up. I was going to say hello and welcome.
Hello and welcome back to the Uncultured Pop Culture Podcast. My name is Brandon.
No, David.
Now let's
I got confused.
Now let's do it again. My name is David.
There we go.
Nice.
And we're both the co-hosts.
We are.
This plane will crash because there's no actual head pilot.
There's no pilot.
Yes.
We're both co-pilots.
Yes, that's right.
We can't figure it out. This is our last episode in person.
Recording together.
Yes, recording together. We will be continuing the podcast via some means online. But
Which we will figure out at some point in time.
Yes, but there will be no delay. Don't worry. Next week, there will still be an episode. But I am moving back to Wisconsin because California does not want me here anymore. They are too expensive for me.
That's right. I kicked him out.
Yep. David made the final decision. And he said, you are going back. But yes.
No, but really, like, you never know. Maybe you'll come back.
You know, that's what I'm thinking
Yes.
about. But
you never know. I won't be sad that you're not here for when you're not here.
And maybe you'll come visit me in Wisconsin and we'll record some podcast episodes then. We'll do one movie, one album a day, and then just go right in. Kind of like we did today. We just watched the movie about 10 minutes ago. We just finished.
A movie that I had never seen, but you had seen, weirdly enough.
Yeah, this is crazy.
I'm going to say it, even though it might not be true, but first time that's ever happened? That is true, right?
I think that's the first time that I've seen something and you haven't.
Because we've done things...
There are movies that we both haven't seen.
Yeah, I was going to say that. But this is the first time. Which is kind of crazy. I never thought that would have happened.
I think it's probably only going to happen like twice more in the entirety of the podcast, unless I start like seeing some movies really quickly.
Because you've only seen like 3 films in film school. That's pretty much it.
Exactly.
Right?
This was a film school one. This was, which we'll get into later, I guess. But this was the first movie I ever watched in a film class. So that's kind of interesting, I think.
Good intro. Not to get ahead of ourselves, but
yeah.
Pretty good intro.
This is at a community college that unfortunately just closed last week.
Oh.
I guess we should ask the eternal question. What have you watched or listened to in this past week?
I already told you this, but I only watched one movie this week.
Mm-hmm. I don't know what it is, though.
That's true. But what movie did I say last week? Did I say...
You said Megamind last week.
Oh, okay. So then, actually, there's 2 movies. I just forgot that it's like... that I watched the movie that I thought I watched last week after we recorded.
Yeah.
Because I've pretty much seen episode 5 and 6 of Star Wars. Rewatched.
Nice.
Yeah. Because I was bored at home and I was like, what should I watch?
Why starting with 5 and 6 and not 4?
Because I feel like I've seen 4 many more times than I've seen 5 and 6.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm kind of don't remember them that well.
That's me with episode 1.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Ironically, I feel like that's the one I've seen the most out of the prequels.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the one I've seen the most for sure.
Yeah. But, I thought you meant the opposite.
No. Episode 1 is like in the prequels. Yeah. That's the movie I've seen the most out of any of the Star Wars movies. I think from the second, like from the original trilogy, it's probably episode 5 I've seen the most, maybe 6. I don't know.
Yeah, I know for me it's definitely A New Hope.
Yeah.
Probably followed by Phantom Menace.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and they're good. They're fun. You know what I realized though? they do hold up. But I realized that weirdly enough, I feel like my perception of Star Wars and in general, most people's of like their idea of what Star Wars feels like has become shaped more by the prequels now.
Yeah.
Because I was watching, when I watched both of them, I was like, oh yeah, this is Star Wars, but it feels a little different at the same time. And maybe that's because I've watched the prequels like more recently than I have the original trilogy, but still.
Yeah.
It feels like more shaped by that now.
Interesting.
But what can I say?
How do you feel the third, like the most recent trilogy fits into that? Do you think that's...
Well, I only ever saw the first one.
Oh my God,
Yeah.
that's right. Yeah.
I saw the first one. Then the second one came out and all the controversy existed. And
Rian
I was
Johnson.
like, yeah. I was like, you know what? I think I'm good. I think I'm going to sit this out.
Did you watch Solo or Rogue One?
I saw Rogue One, and I do really love that movie.
Yeah. I think it's worth watching Solo. I have seen that, and you haven't seen it. So there we go.
Oh, God.
And I've seen both of the other two Star Wars. So I guess there's 3 right there.
So pretty much I'm not going to watch those until we watch those on the podcast.
I guess so, yeah.
I'm going to specifically do that. So this is not the only film that fits that category.
That's crazy, yeah. I think there's one other one on the list that I saw that I was surprised you hadn't seen because I had seen it, and it's not like... I don't even remember what it is, but I remember seeing like a green by my name, and I was like, oh, interesting.
It's quite rare.
It is.
It is quite rare, so we'll see. But what did you listen to anything this week?
I've been listening to a little bit, but I've been mostly like packing and trying to clean up the apartment. But I heard a new song by JP Saxe, who I brought up a few weeks ago of having like a really bad EP. And this new song is good, so I just want to say that.
Redemption.
Yes, Redemption. So I recommend that. And I was surprised. I was pleasantly surprised because it's all written with the same people too.
Yeah.
So
do you think that it's a sign that things will improve, or is it maybe just a...
I do think things will improve because he's written good songs that I've liked before. So
there's a glimmer of hope.
I think he's on the right path now. Maybe that was something he just had to get off his chest. And now he's like, I'm back. So I am excited for that. I think that'll be good.
I guess we'll see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Shall we get into the music this week?
Let's do it.
Sounds good. Real quick before we get into the music this week, I have to apologize for my behavior last week. I did not say the producer of all of the songs on last week's album.
For a second, I forgot that you mentioned that, and I thought you were going to be like, I'm sorry for saying this word or something.
No, it was Elliot James was the producer, and all songs were written by the 3 members of the band. So I just want to say that. I have not forgotten. As I was editing, I was like, oh my God, I'd never said it.
I didn't want to bring up Elliot with 1 L, right?
1 L and 1 T.
Nice. I feel like I've seen Elliot with 2 L's but 1 T before.
I've seen Elliot with 1 L and 2 T's before as well. I prefer the 2 L's, 2 T's. That's just, I don't know. I like that. I feel like
I prefer 2 L's, 1 T.
Interesting.
I almost confused myself there.
Yeah.
Yeah. But let's get into it.
We should rank those. That should be a bonus episode. We should rank all the different variations of common male names.
A 5-minute episode.
Oh, there's plenty. Jeff versus Geoff. Like we have so much to talk about there.
I guess.
But let's start with Simon and Garfunkel.
I'm going to throw one in. Brandon versus Brandon.
Yes. Brandon with an I-N, O-N, or a Y-N.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. Anyway.
And Braden. Oh my God. Okay.
Back to the music.
So anyway, this is Wednesday Morning, 3 a.m. by Simon and Garfunkel.
Well, should we say that we decided not...
We should, yeah.
We decided not to go with the album from the movie.
The Graduate soundtrack, which is kind of an album by Simon and Garfunkel, but also kind of not.
Yes, because there are soundtrack pieces on it.
Yes.
Mixed with the songs. And then most of the songs aren't the versions... I'll say it, the superior versions that you find in the other albums.
Yeah.
So that's kind of why we just decided to just do an album.
Yeah. David ended up listening to the soundtrack album, and I saw him earlier this week, and I asked, and he was like, I think we should probably do something else. We had a whole debate about this, probably 20 or 30 minutes, when we were like picking out this episode of being like, which Simon and Garfunkel album should we do? And then we were like, well... maybe we should just do this Graduate soundtrack, which is what we decided on. And then I was like, well, maybe we should do a different folk thing and not touch Simon and Garfunkel. But then it's like, well, no, we kind of have to. Yeah. It's so important.
Well, I said we should do the soundtrack because I was like, that has all the important songs to the film in it. The problem is they're all very different from the versions that everyone knows. So it's kind of like,
Yeah. So we compromised and we chose the album with the original, The Sound of Silence, the acoustic version.
That's right.
Which is a very important song in here, although it's the electric version used throughout the movie, which I will talk about.
Yeah.
Don't worry.
I'm very intrigued.
But this is Wednesday morning, 3 a.m. This album came out in 1964.
Our oldest album so far.
Oldest album, and I think oldest film, too.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
That's pretty cool. All songs were produced by Tom Wilson, who was the in-house producer at Columbia Records, who Simon and Garfunkel were signed to. And I also wanted to say this is just something that I thought was interesting. Tom Wilson is black. This is 1964, and he's like employed by Columbia Records, which I just thought was kind of crazy because there were not a lot of, and there still aren't a lot of like non-white male producers like involved in the music industry.
Yeah.
You have to like find specific genres, but shout out to Tom Wilson because he produced all of these songs by himself. He also came up with the idea.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah. He also came up with the idea that there would be 6 covers and 6 originals on this album, which I am split on.
Yeah, I am kind of split on that too, to be honest.
And then the only other thing I had to say about the album overall is you can really hear when it's from because of the way that they recorded in mono, and you can have like the pan of one singer in one ear and one singer in the other ear, and it's kind of fun.
It's, like what
it's kind of fun to listen to. Yeah, exactly. It's fun to listen to, but it is different when you're expecting like stereo.
Yeah,
but technically it is in stereo, but like, you know,
and it kind of, if you're listening to it with like buds, you gotta like put both in.
Oh yeah,
otherwise you're like, missing half the song. Is this?
Yeah. There was one time I was listening to, I think it was music that was even older than this, and it was like fully split between 2 ears. The vocals were only on one side, but there was only one singer.
Yeah.
And I didn't have that earbud in. And I was like, it's not even playing. And I put it in, and I was like, oh, I just missed half the song. Anyway,
yeah, that's how all music should be. No kidding.
This album is 12 tracks long. It's split into an A side of 6 songs and a B side of 6 songs. So I'm going to read both the A side and B side numbers and all that. All right. So starting off with track number 1, or A1, You Can Tell the World. This one is a cover. It's written by Bob Gibson and Bob Camp. It is a traditional black gospel song, but the arrangement that Simon and Garfunkel used, which it's unclear if they used it or if they just based it off of, but it was enough that they felt they wanted to credit Bob Gibson and Bob Camp. But this is a traditional song.
Right.
What do you think about this one?
You can definitely tell that, well, I mean, there's gospel elements in it that you can definitely like find. It kind of feels like, I mean, exactly what the song is, a folk cover of a gospel song.
Yeah, it feels traditional.
Yeah, it feels very, very traditional. And to be honest, I feel like you can kind of tell, not to like put down the song, but you can kind of tell that it wasn't written by Simon and Garfunkel.
Yeah.
Because it feels like a lot simpler than their songs.
Do you want me to say my one note?
Yes.
Kind of annoying after a while.
Yeah. It's a very meh.
Yeah, this is a 2 for me.
This is, I think it's okay. I gave it a 3, which in my book is like,
yeah,
it's okay.
I originally had it at a 2.5, and then I listened to it again, like doing my notes, and I was like, actually, I don't like this. Yeah. Like, it's not awful, but it's just kind of like
weak.
Yeah, this is not a good album opener. If we're gonna like talk about track listing and stuff like that, I don't know. I'm split on the like doing the 6 covers inside of the album because they're just kind of like randomly interspersed, which is kind of fun, but it's almost like if you were getting this and it was 2 records or it was 2 sides of the record, it'd be like, wow, I just don't ever have to flip it over because I don't want to hear any of the covers, you know. At least that's what I think.
No, yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just like, I wish it was all their original songs, to be honest.
Yeah.
You know?
I agree. They felt, well, Tom Wilson felt that this was a good way to introduce them, makes sense, to sing songs that people know.
Yeah. Well, I can see that especially with the Bob Dylan song.
Yeah.
Because obviously even nowadays people know that song, but and obviously like at the time people probably knew these covers, but now you're kind of like, I don't even know what the song is.
Yeah.
And it's also just kind of so yeah.
Yeah, this one was unfortunately kind of weak, so they didn't start off very good. But don't worry, it gets better. We move on to track A2. Last Night I Had the Strangest Dream. This one is written by Ed McCurdy. The original recording of it is by Pete Seeger.
Oh.
There's a bunch of different recordings of it. I think this was the one that I looked up that had like 15 to 20 different versions that like all like did something,
right?
Which is crazy. And then it made me like think about how songs used to be, where it's like somebody would write a song and then everybody would just get to record it, and it would chart like every year in the new versions. It's just like that's kind of fun, you know?
Yeah,
bring that back.
Probably like the most famous example is Killing Me Softly, which has like 30 different versions at this point.
There's so many of them. And the weird thing too is a lot of them like sound very similar.
Yeah,
like
it's the same song. It's just the vocals are different. Yeah, that's kind of it.
Sometimes you'll go crazy and you'll do like a different arrangement, but not very often.
Or like a heavy metal version or something. Yeah.
This song is the official song of the Peace Corps, and children were filmed singing the song as the Berlin Wall fell.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I just found that out. Obviously you can't say like, oh, it's the Simon and Garfunkel version they were singing, because it's just kind of like it's the song. But this one was a 3 for me. I enjoyed this one more than the first one. It's not as strong as like we were saying as their originals, I feel like. But I don't know. I felt like this one was much more, it felt more like their style, I guess.
Yeah.
Than the first one.
I do like it more than the opening song. And I agree it's still weaker than their songs. I still give it a 3, which maybe now like I should move the first song to 2.5. I'll see. Maybe I will. It still isn't like,
it's not Simon and Garfunkel yet.
Yes.
We're not there.
You can tell. I feel like with this album, you can really tell. There's just something that feels more mature and complex about their songs.
I agree.
Even though like if you just listen to it, you're like, there's nothing complex here, but there is. It's just like not surface level, I guess you could say.
It's their style, and like you believe it a little bit more in a way. Maybe also I wanted to say this. I think like 5 of these songs were all recorded on the same day, which is insane. Damn. It was like March 31st, 1964 or something like that. They recorded like 4 days for these 12 songs, and it was just like random days, crazy. And they just do them all, which is just like wild to me.
That is really crazy.
I could not sing for that long.
I definitely couldn't.
We move on to track number 3, Bleecker Street. This one is written by Paul Simon.
Hell yeah,
so
baby.
This is our first original by them. I wrote 1 note on this one. I have mostly 1 note on most of these songs because I feel like
there isn't that much to say.
There isn't a lot to say, and I, at the risk of repeating ourselves, this is very much like some of the other albums where we've done, where it's kind of 1 note.
Yeah.
And I do like the note that we're on, it reminds me of last week, but this one is one that stood out to me because we get a little bit more melancholy feel, which is what I like from Simon and Garfunkel.
That's true.
I like when they're a little bit sad, and this one feels a little sad to me. Yeah, exactly. This one is a 4.
Nice. I do think that it is a little weaker than some of their other songs. It is a 3.5, but I still think it's obviously a big step up from the first 2 songs.
Yeah.
And it's like, you can tell that this is a Simon and Garfunkel song.
Absolutely.
Right away.
Yeah. This is the one where it's like, okay, now the album's starting.
Yeah, exactly.
Track number 4 is Sparrow. This one is also written by Paul Simon. This one is an interesting idea, but it can get a little old to me sometimes. It becomes a little heavy-handed with the bird imagery. But I do
can see that,
like I like it. It's just not as, it doesn't draw me in as much as some of the other ones. This one's a 3 for me.
Interesting that you say that, because I always felt like the song was kind of overlooked, actually. I like it quite a bit, and I like it a little bit more than Bleecker Street. It's a 4 for me.
Okay. Interesting.
It's definitely not their strongest song. Like, obviously, it's
on the
album
or like
just in general.
In general. Okay. That's what I did.
This is one where like, it'll come on and it'll be like, oh, heck yeah, it's Sparrow, and I'll listen to it and I'll be happy I'm listening to it. But like, if you had to be like, oh, name a Simon and Garfunkel song, I won't name this one. Like, I won't remember it that well,
Yeah.
So I still like really enjoy listening to it, but it's not, it's not the same.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
Track number 5 is Benedictus. This is a traditional song arranged by Paul Simon and Art Garfunkel. Look at him. He gets a credit finally.
Finally. Poor man.
Yeah. I don't know the whole story of how they broke up. I don't know that anyone will ever know until we have a documentary about it after they're both dead. Or maybe a biopic, because that seems to be what we're doing right now. Yeah, true. Let's get Timothée Chalamet as one of them.
he can be Art because he can pull off the curly hair.
Yeah, exactly. But
Danny DeVito's Paul Simon.
Oh my God.
Because he's short. There we go.
Yeah. So Benedictus, this is a traditional song. I wrote down it feels like a worship song. I don't know for sure if it is, but I think it is because Benedictus sounds like a Catholic church kind of deal.
Well, I'm like, this is kind of just like a biblical chant.
Yeah. I do like the arrangement on this one. I gave it a 3.
Me too.
I think ultimately, like, it suffers from the fact that it's not their song, you know? But this is where you get to see, like, they are really good at arranging.
They are.
And they're good at harmonizing, and they're good at, like, drawing you into this song, which I'd probably consider boring if it was by another, like, covered by another artist.
I agree to the point that this is, like, one of the cover songs that I actually really liked. I give this one a 4.
Oh, wow.
I thought it was actually, I thought it was really interesting because it kind of feels like it shouldn't work, like kind of mixing chant and folk, but it does for me.
It does. I
agree. In a
agree.
really weird way. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
it feels like a fresh take. Although I don't know this song, like it feels like a fresh take on what I imagine this song is.
And it's like a vibe song. And everyone knows I like a vibe song. So it's a 4.
Nice. This is not my favorite cover. There's one later that is my favorite cover.
I think I might have an idea.
Oh, interesting.
We'll see.
Okay. Now we move on to the song that everybody's been waiting for, the last song of the first side, track A6. This is The Sound of Silence acoustic. This song is originally The Sounds of Silence.
Right, which is why they named their second album The Sounds of Silence.
Exactly. And this is the acoustic version. Apparently everybody knows the electric version. I don't.
Me neither.
I know the acoustic version. That's what I heard on the radio. That's what my parents played for me.
And I think this is the superior version.
Absolutely. Yeah. This is not the version they use in the movie, which is a little bit disappointing, but I understand why they didn't, which I'll get into.
I will say, I feel like there's another acoustic version with the drum beat. Like the drum.
I also thought that. Yes.
I think there is, because that's the version I know. I think that might be the version in The Sounds of Silence or something.
Okay, yeah.
Because I was like, that's the one thing that's different from the version that I have in my head.
I think it's when they say whisper, I remember them saying whisper again in the background in like the version that I know.
Yeah,
and they didn't in this one. And I was like, huh.
I think they just tweaked it.
They must have, yeah. But this song was written by Paul Simon. And its melody is inspired by the 1913 Zarzuela El Condor Pasa by Daniel Alomia Robles. He's a Portuguese composer. I don't know if I said any of that correctly, but...
Well, that's interesting because they have a song called El Condor whatever.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah. It's one of their later songs, which now I'm kind of like, is that also in like adaptation or something like that?
Interesting. I don't know, like, I didn't even realize they did this many covers. I just know, like, their hits, basically, because that's what I grew up listening to.
Yeah, I feel like no one realizes that this is a cover. Or, like, that it uses elements, I
guess it's an interpolation, maybe? Like, I don't really know.
Probably an improvement.
Yeah.
Not to put the other person down, but you're going up against like, Sound of Silence.
I mean, this is probably their biggest song.
I would say so, yeah.
This is the one that I associate with them. I believe Mrs. Robinson has more streams on Spotify, which is very interesting because there's multiple versions of The Sound of Silence. But this is
that's probably it.
When I think of Simon and Garfunkel, this is the song I think of.
This is like their song in the sense of the song for them, for sure. Yeah.
They auditioned this song for Columbia, which gave them their record deal, which I thought was very interesting.
You can see why.
Yeah. The original version was released in October 1964, and it did not do well, much like this album. It was a failure.
Damn.
Then Tom Wilson was like, what if I change it? So he overdubbed it with electric guitars and drums and made the electric version without the knowledge of Simon or Garfunkel.
Oh.
That version went #1 in the US.
Damn.
Yeah. I have a quote from the Wikipedia page about this song. The remixed version was released as a single in September 1965, so almost a year after. Simon and Garfunkel were not informed of the song's remix until after its release. The remix hit #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 for the week ending January 1st, 1966, leading the duo to reunite and hastily record their second album, which Columbia titled Sounds of Silence, in an attempt to capitalize on the song's success.
Wow.
They had broken up at this point, which I think is very interesting because they did it again.
As anyone that knows their history knows.
Very famously.
Did it again and again and again. Many times.
Yeah. This song, if you want to feel bad about yourself, this song was written when Paul Simon was 21.
Oh, I already feel bad about myself before I heard that.
I mean, yeah.
Thank you.
I did too. But I saw that and I was like, yeah, unfortunately, I do have to say that because it's like, wow, that's...
Well, hey, someone didn't do something until their 40s probably.
That's true.
There we go.
And I like to say maybe a song I wrote when I was 21 is going to be the one that makes me $1 million. I don't know.
And this song got rewritten a bunch of times, so don't
That's
forget
true.
that.
And it got covered famously by Disturbed.
That's right.
Yes.
Which I've heard that version and I don't like it.
I think it's all right, actually. I'm going to say. It's definitely not as good as the original because I feel like the original is kind of like, it's not untouchable, but it's very much like, it's very good.
Okay, you're allowed to come back to California.
Okay.
Now that you said that second part, I'll allow it.
I also wanted to say that when they were making the electric version, it was very hard because this was not like recorded to like a metronome or anything. It was just, they just kind of recorded it. So Tom Wilson had a nightmare to try to figure out like how to get everything lined up because obviously you're recording the tape at this point. Like you got to get it. So yeah.
They didn't have a click track.
No.
Yeah.
They broke up for the first time because the album failed. It wasn't necessarily about a disagreement, but they were like, well, the album was bad. Columbia doesn't want us. Might as well just break up. And
because I know their later breakups were because they like hated each other.
Yes, exactly.
Due to a variety of reasons. Mm-hmm. But that's interesting that the first time they were like, okay.
Yeah, it seemed to be kind of amicable in a way.
Yeah.
But Paul Simon was in Denmark when he found out that this song was like doing well, and he bought a billboard and a cash box, and he was like, "Oh my god, it's on both of them." Which cash box was a chart that like was before Billboard, and then Billboard like overtook it. Supposedly it still exists, but I don't know why.
For 1 second, I did think that you literally meant he bought a billboard and a cash box because he was just like, "Oh, I have money now. I can buy
a
stuff."
magazine of both. Yes,
I was very confused.
Excuse me.
No, I understood.
Yes, but this was number one on the Hot 100 and on the Cashbox 100, and this song was on the radio. Like that's how it started. It was on college radio,
right?
In Harvard and Tufts in Massachusetts and Boston, and then it was also played in Florida, presumably because the students were on spring break and wanted to hear the song. So,
hell yeah.
That's kind of cool. But I think I wrote down this is a classic for a reason.
Yep.
And I think it's the perfect mixture of melancholy, hopelessness, and folk music.
I agree.
This is a 4.
Wow.
I might go a little bit higher, but I'm going to keep it at a 4 for now.
I'm surprised.
Because I like another song by them better.
Right.
Not on this album, unfortunately. Scarborough Fair, I'll spoil it. That's my favorite song by them.
We'll discuss that at some point.
Yeah.
This is one of my favorite of their songs. I'm not going to say it's my definitive favorite because I can't choose.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard. And I do feel like we've just discussed songs before where no matter how much it's memed or like put on the radio, it still feels fresh.
Yeah, we talked about that with Viva La Vida.
Exactly. I think this is one of those songs.
100% agree. Yeah. It still hits every time you hear it.
And you hear it so much. Like it's everywhere
and
at
I think,
this point.
Yeah, I feel like that's kind of part of the reason that it is a good meme is because like you can like laugh about it and be like, that's funny. And then it's like actually like, no, this is a great song. And I actually am feeling the things that I'm supposed to be laughing about, you know?
Absolutely. This is a 5. I think it's perfect.
Nice.
Not like, obviously this version isn't perfect. Like I've talked before about how there probably is another acoustic version that's more well known, but just in the sense of that the acoustic version of the song is perfect. It's a 5.
Yeah.
There we go.
I assume you'd rate the electric version like a 4.5.
I guess.
We're not technically talking about it right now, but you know.
The thing is, I feel like the electric guitar is just overpowering. It's too much for this song.
This song is meant to be quiet.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, he wrote it like with the lights off.
Yeah.
I think it was like in his bathroom. Yeah. So that ends the first side of the record. Now we're flipping the record over and we're going to track number 7 or B1. He Was My Brother. This is written by Paul Simon. It's dedicated to Michael Schwerner, James Chaney, and Andrew Goodman, who Paul and Art knew from Queens College. They were lynched in Mississippi, fighting for equal rights for black people. They were lynched by the KKK.
Right.
I wrote down that I think this is a classic protest song. And I did also want to say that supposedly this song was written about the death
Oh.
It wasn't though, because it was recorded in March and they died in June. So I don't know where that like myth came from, but it is dedicated to them.
Right.
And it was written about a situation that could happen and then ended up happening to people that they knew.
But it makes sense why that was kind of born, because, you know, like the song was taken and like used as an anthem. So
exactly,
you know, like you can see
it's
where
a protest song.
Yeah, exactly. You can see where that idea that it was written for this was born from, or something like that.
I gave this one a 3.5. I really do enjoy this one. And this is another example of Simon and Garfunkel being better at making their own music than covering other people's songs.
Yeah. I agree. I gave it a 3.5. Going into the second half, I was actually like, I don't like remember the Simon and Garfunkel versions of any of these songs.
Yeah.
Because obviously like everyone knows Go Tell on a Mountain, or, you know, like the Bob Dylan song.
Well, I didn't even look at that when we picked out the album. And I was like, oh my God, this song? I had no idea.
Oh, yeah. And I feel like I've never even heard this song before.
I also feel that way.
But it is a really good song. I don't think, obviously, it's as strong as some of like their other songs.
Yeah.
But it's still a very good song. And I enjoy it.
I do like this one better than some of the other originals. I mean, I gave it a 3.5. So I will slightly disagree with you, but not much. Next, we move on to track number 8, or B2. This is Peggy O. This is a traditional song, Scottish folk song, and it's arranged by Simon and Garfunkel. This is an example of what they do so well. They are so good at singing. They are so good at harmonizing. Unfortunately, the lyrics are kind of annoying after a while.
Right.
This one is a 3, though, because I feel like the arrangement is so nice and it's very enjoyable. It is more of a vibe if you're not paying attention to the lyrics. If you're paying attention to the lyrics, then it's kind of like, at least for me, it's kind of like, really?
We get it.
Yeah.
I wrote down one thing for the song, and that was probably an adaptation or a cover of an Irish folk song.
Okay,
so I got
that's
close.
pretty good. Scottish,
yeah. I didn't have anything to really say about the song. It's fun.
Yeah,
I do think that it is purely a vibe song. You don't focus on lyrics. I have always enjoyed like these types of folk songs. I think they're fun. You know, like you hear them and you're like, yeah, I'll bop along. So I gave this.
For context, David is doing a jig, sitting down right now
with my arms.
Yes, with his arms.
Yes. So I think I give it a 3.5. I think it's fun. Not as strong as like most of their original songs.
Yeah.
But still fun.
What did you give the other cover that you liked? I think it was Last Night I Had the Strangest Dream. Was that also a 3.5? Or is this your favorite cover? Or wait, Benedictus.
No, that was a 4. That will be my favorite
that
cover.
is your favorite cover.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Now we move on to track number 9, or B3. This is Go Tell It on the Mountain. You may have heard this song before. I always think of this as a Christmas song, personally. A lot of like religious songs just feel like Christmas to me.
Yeah.
You know? This is a traditional, of course, and arranged by Simon and Garfunkel. And I have one note about this song. I've always hated this song. Nothing against them. This is a 2. This is my least favorite song. Also, track 9. So that's pretty interesting. Least favorite song on the album.
I will say this week we're not really going to diverge that much. It's a 3. Maybe it'll go down to 2.5. Again, 3 for me does mean meh.
Yeah.
So
is this your least favorite song, or is it You Can Tell the World?
I don't know if it's the first one or this one. Like,
yeah.
Maybe it's a tie. I don't know. I kind of feel like I should bring both those down to 2.5. Well, I don't know. I'll think about it. Maybe I'll change in the future. I'm going to keep them where they are right now.
Yeah. This is your least favorite song of this side of the album now. Yeah.
Pretty much. It's
yeah.
It's very boring.
I agree. I don't like this song done by anyone. I don't like. I do not like this song. Like that's just one of the ones that's just like, this is not for me.
No, yeah, I agree.
I think they sound good, you know? Like that's why I wrote nothing against them. Don't take it personally, guys.
Yeah.
Track number 10, or B4, is The Sun Is Burning. This is written by Ian Campbell. This is a cover. This is my favorite cover of the album.
I can see that, yeah.
It's another song about war, and I took some lyrics out. I think this is verse 4. There's no chorus, it's just like folk structure.
Right.
Now the sun has come to earth, shrouded in a mushroom cloud of death. Death comes in a blinding flash of hellish heat and leaves a smear of ash, and the sun has come to earth. I think that's cool.
Yeah.
Good imagery. Shout out Ian Campbell.
Yeah.
This one is a 3, maybe a 3.5, I wrote. I could see it going up.
So that was your highest score for a cover, huh?
Yeah, I felt like it's very clear that the covers are not as good.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. I give this one. I like the song. I thought it was very quiet and simple, which I like. I always feel like that fits Simon and Garfunkel very well. It's a 3.5 for me. I like this one.
Yeah. This I could definitely see this going up to a 3.5 for me.
Yeah.
So maybe I wrote on the notes actually maybe 3.5. So maybe I'll put it up there.
Who knows?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Now we move on to track number 11 or B5. The times they are a changin'.
Bob Dylan.
The Afro. What was that voice?
I was trying to sound like Bob Dylan. It didn't work, but
the aforementioned Bob Dylan cover written by Bob Dylan. And I said, this song, they sound like they're trying to do a Bob Dylan impression.
They kind of do.
Like the inflection is very similar, and it sounds like the Bob Dylan song, but just with like the harmonies that are the Simon and Garfunkel touch. Now I'm gonna say something controversial.
You don't like it?
I don't really like this. I'm not a huge Bob Dylan fan. This one's a 2.5.
I do like the song, and I do like Bob Dylan. I haven't heard much of his stuff. I agree. I think his version is stronger.
Interesting.
Just because he's not trying to do like kind of an impression of himself. Like I kind of feel like with Bob Dylan, the person that should sing them should be Bob Dylan because they kind of fit him.
Interesting.
In a weird way.
Yeah.
So for me, the strength of the song carries this and gives it a 4. I do think his version is better though.
I'm going to counter that. I don't think Bob Dylan should be singing any of his songs. I think it should be Timothée Chalamet on all of them, personally. But that's just me. No, I do. We
never discussed that film, huh?
We didn't. Yeah. No, I think we're just going to gloss over it. I think Bob Dylan is very talented. I think he has a lot of great like writing. His voice can like bother me very much, very easily. But there are songs. My dad is a huge Bob Dylan fan, and he has played me a few songs. I've been like, okay, I can see how it works on this song.
Yeah.
But it doesn't always work for me.
Which I get.
So, Yeah. But shout out Bob Dylan.
I remember the first time I heard him, I was like, what the hell is this? This has to be a joke.
Yeah.
And then with time, I kind of like, oh, okay, I get it. So
yeah,
I get it. I get that.
And the last song of the album is track number 12 or B6. Wednesday morning, 3 a.m. We end with the title track.
Yeah.
This one is written by Paul Simon, and I wrote one thing. A very nice end to the album.
Yeah.
This one's a 3. This is another one that I thought maybe could go to 3.5, but I'm going to keep it at a 3 right now because it's not as memorable, I feel like, as some of the other ones.
Right. I agree. I gave it a 3.5. I think it's a very gentle, soft song.
It's a good way to end.
Yeah. Definitely not as strong as some of their more well-known songs, which is kind of like, you can kind of see why they're more well-known.
Right.
But yeah, I still think it's a very good song.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
What did you give this album overall? Because it is a very mixed bag of 6 covers and 6 originals. Some of the covers are good. And then both of our least favorite songs, like the 2 of them are covers. So
yeah, I think I kind of went back and forth on it. I think ultimately the strength of, Sound of Silence and some of the other well-known songs from this album made me give it a 3.5.
That makes sense.
If not, it would have been maybe a 2.5 or a 3, to be honest. But I think like the strength of those songs kind of pull it up. There aren't actually that many really strong songs in this album.
Which is surprising.
Yeah.
And I guess, I don't want to say it, but I guess I can kind of see why it didn't sell that well.
Yeah.
Because I feel like later they kind of find their footing more.
Yeah, because I feel like there's just one album of theirs that I've heard quite a bit. And thinking back to listening to that album, even though obviously not all the songs are, great.
Right.
There isn't one song where I was like, I want to skip this.
And there were a few on here, unfortunately.
Yeah, there were, to be honest, quite a few. So,
but I do think it is important to kind of start with this as the album. I'm glad we chose this one with the movie because I feel like Sound of Silence, obviously. But then it's also kind of this is, like you had said, this is probably what everyone working on The Graduate had heard and been like, we should get these guys
especially
to do it.
The director, Mike Nichols.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think it's also interesting to see kind of where they started because you can see the trajectory too.
You can. I thought you were going to say the traditional songs as well because that is interesting because they are honoring the folk tradition of covering these songs that are well known and well respected. At the time. I mean, obviously we don't know all of them anymore.
Yeah.
But yeah, this album for me is a 3.
Yeah.
I feel like
I get it.
if it didn't have Bleecker Street and the Sounds of Silence, this could be a 2 or a 2.5, because I feel like it can get a little bit much at some points where it's just like, I want to hear you guys doing your thing, you know? Like, I feel like that's my biggest complaint. I feel like that's also your biggest complaint. Like, I feel like, you know,
100%, yeah.
we're in agreement on this album.
It unfortunately sounds like an album of covers.
Yeah.
Which I feel like you never really want an album to sound like that, even if there are a lot of covers.
Yeah, you want it to sound like yours.
Yeah, you want to make it your own. So I think that's ultimately the biggest problem with it.
I agree.
Yeah.
I do think that The Sound of Silence and Bleecker Street are in my I'd say top 10 Simon and Garfunkel songs.
Yeah. I mean, I know for me, Sound of Silence is definitely up there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't listened to their entire discography, but I have heard other songs and other albums by them more than this. Like, this is my first time hearing this album, and obviously, like I said before, finding out that they sang "Go Tell It on the Mountain" early on in their careers.
Now you know.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I'm glad we listened to it. This is probably not something I'm going to return to very often.
Same here.
Maybe ever. But I've picked out the songs I like. Yeah. So, you know.
And that's what's important. Shall we get into it?
Let's get into it.
Let's do it.
This is your first time watching The Graduate.
That's right. Which is kind of crazy because it is a classic.
Yeah. I had obviously not known anything about this film. I had known nothing about films when I went to film school because I was like, I want to write TV. So that's all I need to watch.
And then they were like, you have to take all these film courses.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This was at community college, like I said before. This was our first, like, we watched it in the classroom. And the professor, I remember, like, starting off the class, and he was like, he explained the log line of the movie, which you will do in a second. And he said, guys, I promise it's not like that.
Yeah.
This is actually a good movie. And everybody's like, oh, I don't know. And then we watched it and we were all like, okay, actually you are right. This is way better than we thought it would be based on the log line.
I also want to throw this out there. I know a lot of people are like, oh, hell yeah, we got to watch a movie in class. For some weird reason, and maybe this was because I wasn't getting much sleep because it's college, but I would always fall asleep. I
kind of would too, unfortunately.
Yeah, whenever we watched the movie. Even if it was a movie I loved. So what can I say?
Yeah.
I just remember that. I don't know why.
The chairs were always so uncomfortable, but somehow
maybe that's why, like, you couldn't fully enjoy the movie. So then your body was like, you know what? I'm going to go to sleep.
Might as well just give up. Yeah.
Because you're like, it's like I got 3 hours of sleep last night. So there we go. So anyway, this is the IMDb logline. A disillusioned college graduate finds himself torn between his older lover and her daughter, which,
Yep. I feel like that kind of doesn't, it's another example of, I don't know if this really captures what the movie's about.
The film is a lot more complex than that.
Very much, yeah.
But as we said, Mike Nichols, who I love.
Which is even more surprising that you haven't.
But.
Well, it's even more surprising you haven't seen this film because you told me that, like, I knew this was Mike Nichols, but I don't, like, really know who that was.
Yeah.
And you had, like, mentioned some of the other films that he did, and I was like, oh. And then you had talked about how much you liked them. So that was even more surprising to me that you had never seen this.
Absolutely. He is a fantastic director. But yeah, I think he's honestly kind of overlooked. A lot of people are like, oh, this auteur, that director, this and that, but they never really talk about him that much.
I mean, yeah, I barely ever heard about him.
Which I think is... no, that's not right. Yeah,
it's nah.
It's nah. Yeah. Anyway, let's get into it.
Let's.
Directed by Mike Nichols, produced by Lawrence Turman, written by Calder Willingham and Buck Henry, which there's a little caveat there that I'll mention later. Adapted from the book The Graduate by Charles Webb, which I never realized.
I also did not know that until right now.
I did not know it was a book before I did the research on it. Cinematography by Robert Surtees. I think that's how you pronounce his name. Edited by Sam Osteen, and music by Paul Simon, songs, and Dave Grusin, soundtrack.
Once again, Garfunkel being Garfunkel.
That's right. He's just he just be singing.
I guess so.
Poor Garfunkel. I think that was honestly their dispute, that he was
believe so, that he wasn't getting credit for anything.
Yeah, that was at least part of it. And then I think, not to go on another little tangent, but I think Paul Simon's part of his, like, thing with Garfunkel was that everyone would be like, Garfunkel, your vocals are amazing, especially on like Bridge Over Troubled Water. And Simon would be like, hey, I also sing. Like,
yeah.
So anyway.
And being the songwriter, I imagine that would feel, especially when you're like 22, 23, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah.
But starring Dustin Hoffman, Anne Bancroft, and Catherine Ross, among many others. Let's start off with Mike Nichols. So you don't know like anything about him, right?
I really don't. I know he's done other films that we've like talked about and said we're going to do at some point, but I really I don't know anything about him.
So when he came onto this project, or when he was trying to come on this project, he was actually largely unknown in Hollywood. He had done a comedy act. He was actually kind of like known as a comedian before. With Elaine May, who I don't know if you know who she is. She is a fantastic screenwriter. She worked a lot with him. She wrote The Birdcage, which he directed. Yeah. And she also directed.
Interesting.
Reportedly very good films. I haven't seen them myself, but I want to watch them. Before she made a film that bombed. And of course, Hollywood being Hollywood, they're like, you're a woman, so that's your last chance.
Yep. It's kind of crazy she got a chance, though, I will say.
I know. I'm happy she did, because she's really, really talented, as is Mike Nichols. But he pretty much started directing Broadway plays. And that kind of made him connections, stuff like that. And he eventually read this book, and he wanted to direct it. As he has said, he was first drawn by the character of Mrs. Robinson, someone he felt he understood very well. And I actually have a quote from him where he says, quote, "A woman who has a very low opinion of herself, who is now almost parroting herself out of anger with herself for having left who she had been," end quote.
Interesting.
Which, I thought it was very interesting. So because he had never directed anything, obviously a lot of people didn't want to just say, direct a movie. And producer Lawrence Terman, he pushed for Nichols in spite of that fact, but still they were having issues. Until Elizabeth Taylor chose Nichols to direct her and Richard Burton, who, do you know who those people are?
I've heard their names.
Yeah, they're big stars during this time. And her marriage to Richard Burton was famous for being like the Hollywood couple, even though it was very tumultuous and all that shtick. But she chose him to direct them in the film adaptation of Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf.
He did that too?
He did that.
Wow, okay, yeah.
And that was his first film.
Interesting.
And that's one of my favorite films from him. Like, that's, not to spoil it, but that's a 5. Like, it's an amazing film. And it's based off an amazing play, etc., etc. But pretty much because of that film, because Taylor was like, I want you to direct it, they got financing from Joseph E. Levine. And so they brought in Buck Henry to write the script. And the reason why you see 2 scripts on there is because it seems like Calder Willingham had been brought on to write a version that was never made. But because there were some similarities, he just got like the credit.
Yeah.
But the script that you see in this film was written 100% by Buck Henry, obviously adapted from the book.
Yeah.
But you could see Mike Nichols' like theater background during the production, because he actually had all the actors learn all of their lines before production started.
Interesting.
Which is not typical.
Yeah.
But is obviously typical in a play where you just got to know them all.
I was thinking also some of the blocking is very like theater, but it kind of works sometimes for me.
I will also say some of the blocking is also just like the older style of filmmaking where a lot more was just done in one take, which I think has both its upsides and downsides. But mostly it's upsides. But now let's talk about casting. Because that was a very long process. There were a lot of people that either wanted to or didn't want to like be in this film.
I could see why. You know, like it might ruin your reputation or it might make it entirely.
Well, with the character of Mrs. Robinson, as you can imagine, the nudity was a big problem. Doris Day turned it down. She was a big Hollywood star. Ava Gardner, who I'm sure you've heard of, she actually wanted the role, and she like summoned Nichols to her house, and she said, reportedly said, quote, "Let's discuss your movie. First of all, I strip for no one," end quote. So obviously he didn't cast her. He also didn't think she was right for the role. But ultimately they casted Anne Bancroft. Benjamin Braddock also took a long time to cast. And actually a lot of people seem to want this role. Some people that auditioned or were considered were Charles Grodin, Harrison Ford, and and Ronald Reagan.
Whoa, I forget he's an actor.
I feel like everyone forgets, which we could have had Ronald Reagan in this film.
That would have been interesting.
That would not have worked at all. Are you trying to I'm not going to try. I'm not going to try. Robert Redford, call back to our Ordinary People episode, also auditioned, and he actually really, really wanted the part, but Nichols felt that he wouldn't be able to play Benjamin believably.
I could see Redford in this, actually, I will say.
Well,
but
you'll see Nichols' thought processes in a second, because Redford questioned him. He was like, "Why don't you think I could?" And Nichols asked him, "Have you ever struck out with a girl?" And Redford said, "What do you mean?"
Okay.
And then Nichols said, "That's precisely my point." Which I do kind of agree with. Like, obviously he's a fantastic actor, but I do feel like there's just something about him. Like, there's this aura about him that, like, it's
I get that.
Robert Redford, you know? Like, the way he carries himself. Hoffman,
he's got that swag.
Exactly. You know, he's the Sundance Kid.
Yeah.
Hoffman had actually already been cast in another film. He was unknown at this time. He was a theater actor. He was known for that. But, you know, he wasn't really known in the film world. But he had been cast in Mel Brooks's The Producers. And he found out about the auditions for this film, and he asked Brooks if he could audition for it, if he could, have time off. And Brooks, whose wife Anne Bancroft had just been cast. That's right.
Oh,
yeah,
interesting.
I forgot. I had learned this, I think, several years ago, and then I forgot. But Brooks, because Anne Bancroft was in the film, he knew what it was about and who the characters were, and he was like, "Yeah, you can go," and in his mind, he was like, "Because you're never gonna get that role. You're not right for it." And when Hoffman first walked into Joseph Levine's office, Levine thought that he was the window cleaner.
Oh my God.
So Hoffman, in character, started to clean the windows, which is very on track for Hoffman. If you don't know anything about him, he's very like that. And Mike Nichols decided to cast him. He thought that he was perfect for the role, in large part because of his awkwardness during their audition.
Yeah.
Which I think you can definitely see in it. And Hoffman has said of his casting that, quote, "As far as I'm concerned, Mike Nichols did a very courageous thing casting me in a part that I was not right for, meaning I was Jewish. In fact, many of the reviews were very negative. It was kind of veiled anti-Semitism. I was called Big Nose in the reviews, a nasal voice," end quote, which is very interesting.
I didn't even pay attention to that.
Well, I feel like nowadays it's like it's crazy to think about, but that did kind of exist at the time.
Yeah. I mean, well, it's still...
Well, I mean, it still
does.
Obviously, it still does. It's just Hoffman was 30 years old when he made this film.
I thought he was older, but that's crazy. Yeah. I was thinking 25 max.
Oh, yeah. He was also only paid $17,000.
That's crazy.
I know. He pretty much had no money left by the time he finished production.
How much is that worth now? It's got to be
I could look it up.
It can't be that much different though.
What year was it? 1967.
67.
So I just looked it up, and that's $162,000. So it is a big chunk of change.
But for being the lead in a movie, a studio movie,
yeah,
I don't know.
Still not that much.
Who's making $100 million now? There's got to be some Marvel people that are making insane numbers.
Probably.
Because I mean,
Robert Downey Jr.
Yeah. Why else are the movies costing $400 million to make?
Exactly. Interestingly enough, Anne Bancroft was only 8 years older than Catherine Ross, who plays her daughter, and only 6 years older than Dustin Hoffman.
Wait, the daughter's 32?
8 years older than her. She was 27, I believe.
Oh.
Or something like that.
Yeah.
And I think Dustin Hoffman had just turned 30 or something like that.
Okay, so she's also not a teenager.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Or a 20-year-old,
definitely
whatever
not.
They're supposed to be, 2021.
I think I heard somewhere that for years, until people found her birth certificate, people thought she was a lot younger than she was. So, she lied about her age, which a lot of actresses obviously did, because if you're over a certain age, then that's it, your career was done. But yeah, Anne Bancroft was in her 30s when she...
I thought so, because she really does not look that old.
Yeah, she doesn't look that old. Especially for the 60s.
Yeah, and for someone who's supposed to be presumably 20 plus years older.
Yeah. Exactly. As I mentioned while we were watching the film, this was shot in California, which you can kind of see like the bridge being the sucky second San Francisco bridge, not the Golden Gate one. The Berkeley campus was actually like a mishmash of the UCLA and USC campuses.
That's really funny.
Yeah. I'm like, I bet they didn't tell either campus that they were going to shoot at the other one too.
Yeah, and then also didn't tell them that it's going to be Berkeley.
Yeah, exactly. They actually also used a lot of like guerrilla style of shooting. So a lot of people in shots aren't like extras. They're just people on the street, stuff like that.
That's interesting.
Yeah. I imagine like all the university shots are like that, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also wanted to bring up one little thing about the shooting. In the scene where Hoffman bangs on the glass, in the first take, he was hitting it so hard and making such a loud noise that the whole church was shaking to the point that the priest threatened to throw them out.
Oh my God.
So then he had to like hit it a little softer.
Wow.
Which I thought was fun. And so the final shot of the film is obviously very famous. And a lot of people, you know where they kind of stop laughing and get serious. Like a lot of people point to that as being like, oh, that's like genius, to like that moment of realization. Ironically, that wasn't scripted. In that moment where Ross and Hoffman stopped laughing and kind of became a little like nervous and apprehensive, actually happened because behind the camera, Nichols was shouting at them to keep laughing, and he like scared them into stop laughing.
Wow.
And he like saw that and he was like, oh, this is actually perfect, and he just kept it. Which
I think that
really
is
interesting.
That's a really good end. Like I like it better than them continuing laughing.
Yeah, I think that like you need that little moment where
the realization.
Like, oh shit. Yeah. I think that honestly kind of makes the film.
Yes, on your first watch.
That's right.
Yes. This is very exciting because this is usually what I'm doing.
I know, right?
Like now I can be like, oh yes, I remember when this happened.
We'll see if it happens again.
Yeah.
Yeah, I probably will, to be honest.
At least once. Yeah. Well, Star Wars. We'll get to Star Wars
exactly.
at some point.
I will make sure not to watch them before then.
Yes, don't. It's not worth it. No.
Well, anyway. And then, of course, we got to talk about the music. Nichols had been listening to the music of Simon and Garfunkel when he was working on the film. And at first he thought, like, maybe I'll just use the songs that they've already written and released and just put them in. But he felt like it didn't work well enough, so he brought them on to write for the film. And Simon wrote 2 songs for the film, Punky's Dilemma and A Hazy Shade of Winter, which you might have noticed were not in the soundtrack because they weren't used. He turned them down. Nichols turned them down.
Interesting.
So instead, Simon brought him a few notes of another song that he had been working on, which of course turned out to be Mrs. Robinson. And,
the song.
Yeah. Interestingly enough, what you might notice if you know the song and then you watch the film, the final version of the song is never played in the film.
Yeah.
Because it would not be composed until after the film was finished.
I noticed specifically with the hey, hey, heys. Yeah. I was like, oh, I didn't remember that. It was different. By
the point, for the film, they only recorded the chorus. That's how much they composed, and that's it.
Interesting.
And then later on, they finished the song after the film had already been finished. I don't know like how long after.
Yeah.
But pretty much all the verses like did not exist during the production of the song.
Makes sense why there's do, you know, and just the guitar.
That's why it's very confusing.
Interesting. I did not know that.
One last thing. The famous shot, probably the most famous thing from this film.
The leg?
The leg shot. Specifically the seducing one, because there are kind of 2. You know, when she's also putting on her tights.
Yeah.
That's kind of another famous one. But the famous leg shot where he's like, you're seducing me, aren't you, Mrs. Robinson? Which is the cover of the film. It's everywhere, right? The leg in that shot was not.
I figured because you said I have something to say about the leg. And I was like, oh, it's going to be somebody else's leg. I know it.
It's not Anne Bancroft's legs. It was at that point, unknown model, to me, still kind of unknown because I don't know models, but it was model Linda Gray. So I wanted to give her a shout out and say
shout out Linda Gray.
That's her leg.
Shout out to her legs as well.
Right. They will live in immortality.
Yes.
Let's talk about the release.
Let's. Yeah.
So it came out December 21st, 1967.
This was a Christmas movie?
I mean,
Christmas release.
Yeah. The thing is, at that time, films were released very differently.
Yeah.
Like there wouldn't be wide releases. It would be more similar to a limited release. So it would like open in a few big cities like Los Angeles and New York. So maybe like in 5 theaters. And then little by little, it will kind of like travel across the country.
Yeah.
In waves. So because of that, like this could have been released in, December 1967, but in Wisconsin, for instance, you might not get it till like March of 1968. So like,
or years down the line, maybe.
It would take a long time. So that's why like films would kind of build with like word of mouth. And stuff like that.
When would you get it in Armenia?
Probably like 1995. To be honest, I don't know.
I think I win for the first mention outside of the intro.
Oh gosh, yeah. I will say Jennifer also has seen this film while I haven't.
Wow.
Yeah, I believe she's seen it.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure.
We'll have to ask her.
And I believe she likes it.
Nice.
So should I call her on? No, I won't.
Yeah, call her into the podcast.
Yeah. That way she'll be the first guest, but on a phone call. Yeah. But it grossed $104.9 million.
Whoa.
Again, this is when there weren't that many IP films, so
yeah, and also
other films would actually make money.
Was completely different.
Yes.
But that's still a lot of money.
Well, do you want to guess how much the budget was?
I'm gonna say $8 million.
$3 million.
Wow.
Yeah, it was crazy low. Which is probably why they did
which $3 million is probably like 30 million or whatever. But like
back then it was quite a lot. But
yeah,
it made like pretty. Well, not 100 times, but like like 30 times its budget, pretty much. It was a big success. It was also met with generally positive reviews. They weren't all positive. Some had like some mixed reviews. Roger Ebert did call it the funniest film of the year.
Wow.
Yeah, which is really interesting. But it did go on to get a lot of nominations at I don't remember what the number of that Academy Awards was. 1968 Academy Awards. Yeah. It got nominated for Best Picture, Director, Actor, Actress, Supporting Actress, Screenplay based on material from another medium, which is what adapted screenplay used to be called, and Best Cinematography.
Do you know who was the supporting actress?
It was Catherine Ross.
Okay. And then the lead actress was...
Yeah.
Okay.
Which... I do kind of feel like they're both like.
I mean, I think
actress. Like, I think if you were going to make an argument for who's going to be best supporting, Catherine Ross does kind of make more sense.
I agree. I know we talked a little bit. I think it was with Ordinary People about like the politics of where you get placed,
category
and how you
fraud.
can win.
Who can win easier where? The thing is that ultimately didn't matter because none of the actors won awards. The only person that won anything was Mike Nichols for Best Director.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, for his second film.
That's pretty crazy.
That's awesome. I think he deserves it.
So Hollywood, if you're listening, take a chance.
That's right. Exactly. I mean, Damien Chazelle did it too.
That's true.
And became the youngest person to win Best Director, I think. Anyways, of course, now the film is a classic. It's seen as like one of the defining films of the 20th century. Definitely of the 60s, and it launched the careers of Hoffman and Ross and kind of continued Nichols's like propulsive career after. The also critically acclaimed Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf that won Elizabeth Taylor an Oscar. And he would, of course, go on to direct other fantastic films such as The Birdcage, which I absolutely adore, which we will cover at some point, and other films. I haven't seen any of his other films actually, but they're known. They're like Silkwood, Charlie Wilson's War, stuff like that. And yeah, so now we reach the portion of the podcast where I'm going to ask you first.
Okay.
Because I want to kind of collect my thoughts. But
yeah,
what did you think?
I really liked this film.
Yeah.
I did not think I would ever.
When your teacher told you, oh, this is long line, you're like, I'm gonna hate this.
Yeah, I don't think he even like read the log line. He was just like, so there's just this young guy who has an affair with a married woman, and we're all kind of like, oh.
And he's like, it's a comedy, and you're like, oh,
yeah,
like a tragic comedy, yeah.
But I really like this movie. I feel like it doesn't feel like the 60s. It feels a lot more modern.
Yeah,
I think that the casting is really good. I think the screenplay, is really good. Yeah. There's a few things like that you can pick apart and be like, I don't know that it needs to have a happy ending. I don't know that it has a happy ending, which I'll also say, but as it was intended to have a happy ending.
Yeah.
There are a few like Hollywood things. He drives from LA to Berkeley and then down to Santa Barbara, presumably in one day. That's like 14 hours of driving, I think.
Something like that, yeah.
That's a lot. But okay, cool. That's fine. I'm fine with it.
Yeah.
But I think that this is a really good film. And it reminds me of the kind of coming of age stories that I enjoy, that I like writing, that I like reading, that I like watching. I don't know how to say it really. I feel like you kind of have to have him wrapped up in this affair for it to work. Although it's kind of like, well, I really wish he wouldn't do that, you know?
Yeah.
But like, I feel like that does add more of a different like depth, a different emotion to it.
I agree. In general, I disagree across the board with what you say. I think one of the things that makes it feel in some ways very modern is the character of Benjamin as this very lost person. And maybe that's also because that's what many of us are going through.
Say, does it feel relatable to you? Because it does feel relatable to me. Not that I'm going to get wrapped up in an affair with a married woman, but like that I don't know what I'm doing.
In some ways it does. I know what I'm doing more in the sense I know what I want.
Yeah.
But it definitely, like I definitely connect with the feeling where everything is kind of feels off and unnatural. And it kind of feels like you don't know what you're supposed to do. So you try different things, but they all don't feel 100%, if you know what I mean. And I think that's like that element, but like his character is what kind of makes the film feel very of today. And I can see how that would make it feel very of today at any period, because I feel like that's what people go through at all times. I definitely feel like right now and the 60s were both periods where that was kind of across the board, because they're very like tempestuous time periods, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really remember all about like the economic history of the 60s, but like I would assume that it's not great. And you know, this is around the time of civil rights. We're kind of going through something.
Rights. You had the Vietnam ramping up.
Yeah, going through the same thing right now with people losing their rights.
Exactly.
so you know,
I think that probably like helps it feel more of today. But I agree. Like it doesn't feel like it exists exclusively of the 60s. I feel like in many ways it is a very 60s film.
Yeah.
It fits the style of it very much, which makes me think that you'll like a lot of films from the 60s and 70s.
I may, yeah. I mean, I feel kind of similarly about Ordinary People as I feel about this, where it's kind of like this exists beyond just the time that it's in. You know, like it's much more universal.
Well, and to your point that it is like about, you know, coming of age, I agree there. And I feel like it's kind of coming of age in the sense that a lot of stuff doesn't make sense, and like accepting that, if you know what I mean. And that kind of includes the ending. Like I'm very happy that, you know, they aren't just laughing in the ending. I think you need the realization that stuff is still fucked up.
Yeah, because
in these
to
people's
me,
lives, like that makes the film what it is. That makes it impactful. If they were just happy, it wouldn't be as impactful. It would still be impactful, but not as impactful.
Then it feels too Hollywood.
Yeah.
How did you interpret the ending? Like the smiles fading. How do you like read that? Because I've always had the same reading of it.
My reading of it is obviously like, oh, happy, we are together, we got through it. And then it's kind of like, it can be a lot of things. I think ultimately for me, it was them just realizing how hard everything is going to be. I think that was what it was for me, and kind of like not knowing how they're gonna, like, if they can do that, you know, that's kind of the reading I got from it. Well, I want to see what yours was though.
Yeah, mine is definitely more along the line of something that I would write, and it's they've successfully completed this chase. They've gone through all of their hardships, and they are together, and they realize this actually isn't all that I wanted. Like I thought it would. To me, it's like I wish this felt better. You know, like
I can absolutely see that.
I do think they stay together.
No,
I'm gonna say, but I think because I feel like they are really good for each other, and I loved the writing on that.
Yeah,
I especially like when they go to the strip club and he's like just a complete asshole.
Yeah.
And then
the moment she starts crying, he's like, oh.
Yeah. He's like, oh, actually, I feel bad about this. And I think that's such a great, like, he's 21. I think is
2021.
His age was, something like that. Something very young to graduate
very,
college,
very young.
I will say. But I thought that was really like impactful, and then they're just sitting, presumably eating In-N-Out, in their car. But yeah, I really liked that like scene or collection of scenes, that moment, I guess, in the movie, because it really feels like it's such a good payoff for everything that's happened before, because it's like, you can't do this, it's the way it's set up, and then even the way, like, you don't immediately, he doesn't pick her up and it's immediately like, oh, they're hitting it off, I feel like that was really well done.
Well, yeah, and to your point about the ending, I think it is an ending where you could even have multiple meanings at the same time, and it works, which I think is another strength of the film. I also wanted to bring up something that I loved about another scene. That was when she finds out that, about the affair that Ben has with Mrs. Robinson. Her mother. I love the way that they did that.
How she's like behind her in the doorway.
Yeah, and then she turns around, and seeing her makes her realize. Because I feel like a lot of other like Hollywood films would have had the cheesy, it's your mom, oh no, stuff like that. But like that
over dramatic.
Yeah, but that little quiet moment, I think, makes that moment a lot stronger.
I agree.
For me, yeah. Which I kind of feel like is in general what you find with this film. It could have been very melodramatic, and surface level, but it's not.
I remember in school writing an essay about water imagery in this film. I don't know anything that I said, but I want to bring this up because this is your first time watching it. And much like when it was my first time watching it, I had to write an essay like 2 days later about it. What did you think about the water imagery? Because there's a lot in this.
Well, my view of that was shaped by my notes. I didn't really bring this up because I've honestly felt that we were going to discuss it.
Okay.
So I saved it for this, but I read that Mike Nichols specifically like filmed the water imagery and had a lot of it that way to, show us how Ben is feeling.
Yeah.
And because of that, to me, it was like very obvious that it's like when he goes under the water, right? That's like all the weight on him and stuff like that. And where you have his parents like pushing him back. Yeah. Like I think it's all symbolistic of how he is feeling.
And then you have the floating as well.
Yeah, and then you have the floating of kind of feeling numb and
floating through life.
Yeah, floating through life. So yeah,
when are you going to get a job? You've been sitting around for 3 weeks.
Hell yeah. Of course, nowadays it's like they just won't hire me. So
yeah, exactly.
But yeah, that's the impression that I got from it. Obviously, that's something I got directly from the director. But I think you can see it. Was that your interpretation of it?
I honestly don't remember what my interpretation was at that point, but that sounds good to me now. That's how I read it.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Well, we're going to find that essay and post it on. No,
I really wonder where it is.
We'll find it.
It's like 6 years ago, I think.
That was before COVID, man.
Yeah, it was pre-COVID.
But now that leads us to the important question. What did he give this film?
I want you to go first.
Okay.
Actually.
I've been going back and forth.
As the person who hasn't seen this, you'll go first.
I've been going back and forth between several things.
Okay.
It's not as strong, I will say, as Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf or The Birdcage.
Interesting.
But at the same time, they're very different films, all three of them.
I assume you gave both of those 5s.
Yes.
Okay.
Not to spoil it, but those are both perfect films in my opinion. This is almost a perfect film. I think there are like little things here and there that I maybe would have tweaked, stuff like that. But ultimately, I'm like, this is obviously fantastic, and I couldn't make a film like this.
I think you could.
Maybe.
Someday.
I could maybe get close, but I don't know. I think I'm stuck between a 4 and a 4.5. I think ultimately I'm gonna have to get a 4.5. I think I'm going with that.
Final answer?
Yes.
Okay, it's a 4.5 for me as well.
Nice. Oh, we agree. I think this is the first time.
I was hoping you'd be lower so I could say I like this movie more, but
but you know me with my high scores.
Exactly. Yeah. That's literally what I was thinking as I was watching the gears turn. I was like, this is going to be a 4.5. After you said the other, like after I realized the other two are 5s, and I was like, yep,
you
it's
knew
coming.
At that point, which I wonder if those two will be 5s for you too. We'll see.
The way I thought about this is I thought about 7.
Mm-hmm.
I thought about Challengers. I thought about Call Me By Your Name, which are to me the most memorable.
Yeah.
And I thought I like this more than Challengers, and I like this more than 7. I like it about the same as Call Me By Your Name, maybe a little bit less, but Call Me By Your Name is a 4.5.
So there we go.
So it's a 4.5.
That's a good way of thinking. Yeah, I was like, it's a little bit. I don't like it as much as Birdcage or Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. Yeah. So that's a step down.
I don't think it's perfect.
No, yeah, I agree.
But I do really enjoy this.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the like emotions that Mike Nichols and the writer
Buck Henry,
in parentheses S, make you feel is very good, and it's very in line with the things that I want to feel when I'm watching a movie.
Yeah, I agree.
This is up there for me for sure. So I'm glad you liked it on your first watch.
I did. I'm happy we watched it together as our last film.
Yes, our last film together.
Recording together. Yeah. And
for now.
For now. For the time being.
Maybe someday we'll do like a Netflix party. Yes. And we'll watch on a video call with each other.
A live show.
Yeah. Oh, yes, a live show.
That would be amazing.
We should do a live show. We should buy a theater.
Yes.
And just like
500 seats for 5 people.
Yeah,
that
exactly.
Show up. Yeah. But yeah, I guess that's our episode for today. Of a pretty positive episode, I feel like.
Yeah.
In spite
more
of
positive in the film.
Yes,
definitely.
Yes. Exactly. Well,
leave us a review. I'll take your line. Send us an email, upcpod@gmail.com.
I think you should take that line permanently because I forgot the gmail.com. But yes, follow us on Instagram so you can see what the next week's episode is going to be every week.
Yes. Follow us on Rate Your Music and Letterboxd for all of our thoughts on this and others.
That's right. So you can leave nasty comments if you want.
Yes.
Or not.
Or like our reviews.
That's right. And we'll see you next episode.
We'll see ya.